As Naewasa, we stand for prosperity for all, and as we constantly advocate for holistic transformation, we are one of the stakeholders at the Department of Energy aligning the BEE sector codes. We thought it's important for us to have you all present here today so that we can talk about the challenges as well as the identified opportunities that we have in the energy sector.
As we all know, the energy sector is a highly technical sector, and it requires expertise across economic and scientific disciplines. We want to attain proper economic justice that our former president, Nelson Mandela, has spoken about. One of the challenges that I've identified is the absence of financial strategy to unlock transformation in this sector. There are going to be opportunities in the energy space. We are trying to be more practical than to be theoretical. Recently, we all witnessed our Honorable Minister of Energy, Minister Jeff Hadebe, approving and signing the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer projects. It's going to be important that we consciously, at all levels, government, across the spectrum, business, that we begin to seriously develop the required skills for this particular area.
Globally, renewable energy is 3.6% of the primary energy that serves the human beings on this planet.
An area where we have not enjoyed success is the retail, changing the face of the retail sector. To strive to have 20% of the retail sector being in the hands of black women-owned businesses.
In the Skills Development Act, it was clear for SETAs to gauge themselves moving forward. We want to partner with the Department of Energy and also with the institutions of higher learning.
You know, it's a funny thing about the energy sector. If you ask a guy like Willie Majola here, who's a dyed-in-the-wool electricity man, you listen to him talking, he talks about energy. Actually, he means electricity. If you take a guy like Maurice Radebe here, from the oil industry, he talks about energy. Actually, he means oil and gas. And now we see it in the SETAs. We don't have a SETA for all of energy. It splits between two SETAs. All of these energy carriers are becoming interdependent and interconnected and substitutable. So just focusing on the old one silo or another silo, it might not do it if you want to be in business in the next 10 or 20 years.
As we know, as a matter of fact, that only 6% of the holders of wholesale licenses are active. So how can you make sure that you do audits? Because the license is a government license, nobody owns it.
The IRP, the minister has committed that in the next coming 3 to 4 weeks it should be approved in the cabinet process, but the whole consultation flow has not been indicated.
IPP, in terms of the oil and gas, it can't be that 24 years later in our country, for example, we have not built not even a single refinery, oil refinery. We have depended continuously on the existing refineries. Again, the issue of technology. So our president, His Excellency, is very clear. The country must build a new refinery.
It is true that less than 20% of the wholesale licenses that have been issued are active. All of them are black. I can say 98% are black. So if you cancel the licenses, you are defeating the transformation drive. But of course, you need to then have an intervention to say, how do you then make sure that those who have licenses actually are actively using them. You find that even with the oil companies, they don't own those properties where they put these retail sites. I mean, these retail operations. These are owned by property developers. So we need some kind of intervention even at that. It talks to the land issue. Talks to the land issue. Because the majority of the owners of those sites are not previously disadvantaged South Africans.
We'll be teaching this in the ELC classes, the whole transformation journey, because it's so important to understand it. I said to Priscilla, understand where we started and how we've run, and so that when we hand over the baton to you, you don't run backwards, you run forwards. 1996, the first wholesaler was established in this country. That was Africa Oil. And then with that big milestone, major historical event, 2000, when the Liquid Fuels Charter was formed. Now let me pause for now so that you understand one. The focus on Liquid Fuels Charter was that 25% of the industry will be in black hands in terms of ownership. The journey of transformation had 3 phases. One is wholesaling, secondly, acquisition on the ownership, and thirdly, now we're seeing the bigger major the groups in the energy taking stake. But the focus was on ownership. And then the second one was on management control. If you look at Sapia, at that time when we started, it was all run by white, male expatriate. But if you look at all the CEOs and chairmen of the oil companies now, predominantly black, and I'm proud to say that Priscilla of BP has now been appointed as the first black woman to run BP South Africa. But the most important thing I want you to understand is that this industry is a big value chain. And this value chain is basically upstream, midstream, downstream, and marketing. And the problem we have now is that all of us, and I'm using the word crowded in marketing. And if you start having a lot of people crowded in one place, you reduce the profitability of that space. Now with 2,000 licenses we talked about earlier on, tell me how much margin has been given away already and how much you're going to make money there. Where I would encourage you to look at, and I know it's difficult, I know it's challenging, and people are going to say all the things, but I will encourage you to look at crude, the upstream side of the business. I'm learning it. It's difficult, it's very expensive, and but with smart partnerships, you must think bigger than that. Because if you're all in marketing, we're not going to be able to make true empowerment. Then there's fuel imports. A lot of opportunities in fuel imports there. And you need to focus on that, but you need to know what you're doing. Because you can lose a lot of money. Like in wholesaling, I told Priscilla a story of one widow who was left with a lot of money by one of the senior executives who passed on by an accident, a car accident. And somebody who's a corner street who had a wholesale license, and he came to this lady and said, listen, let's come into wholesaling. We'll make a lot of money. And she took the whole inheritance of the children and poured it into this. With no understanding. And then the cross-border import and export. And when the truck was impounded in Mozambique, and I promise you, she lost everything. Primary export, very important. Understanding what role you can play, road, rail, pipelines, berths, storage, fuel, depots, and road transport, and then marketing. This is the challenge of too many people here. Move up the value chain. I understand the challenges, access to finance, access to market, access to skills, which we talked about, are barriers to entry. But if there's a will, and you're a true entrepreneur, you're gonna do a lot.
When we started with Modest, our different projects, to start Africa Oil, and Modest started Excel, at some stage, Shell was so jealous, they actually called Modest's project Ex-Shell, because he was taking a lot of people, a lot of talent from Shell, and he was really doing what I call black excellence in the oil industry. And I really think that what we're lacking today is those champions. The energy leadership initiative that Prof and Maurice are starting, I think there you get content knowledge. And I absolutely believe that if you don't have content knowledge about what you're getting into, you actually are to a route to nowhere. So for me, how I got my content into this industry, I worked for one of the oil companies. Okay, I worked for them, and then that way, I'm not just learning it, from the book. I actually then understood the systems. What I decided to do with Tarulo was that I said, I'm going to be ubiquitous. So the term I used was ubiquity. So I'm going to be everywhere in the oil industry in terms of the footprint of South Africa's hydrocarbons. So I said, South Africa does not have crude oil, so I'm not going to go and buy an oil field. Because firstly, I don't have the money, I don't have the influence, and I do not understand that business. So what I understood was refining right up to retailing and anything in between, I then applied for the wholesale license, amongst other things. And then I went into one of the transport businesses. I went into Total. I said to Total, listen, I'd like to buy some trucks from you. I think that what you guys do or should do is take your molecule, refine it, and market your brand. Anything in between someone else can do. And there I found amenability. Total said to me, we've got 55 trucks. We want to outsource this whole thing about transportation. If you think you can raise the money, we are game. So Total took 49% of my business. I had 51% of the company. I went into Transnet and said to them, give me 10 million liters. I've got a supply contract with Total. And they said to me, okay, we'll give you 10 million liters if Total basically gives you funding and stuff like that. So I went to Total. I said to Total, listen, I don't need you to give me any cash. Just give me product and put a guarantee. At the back of that, I bought 55 trucks from Total. And we started a company called Fuel Logic, right? Which is basically to move fuel by road. And when I left that business, which I haven't completely left, we have 320 trucks today. I was researching this industry, how to get involved in this thing, meandering myself throughout. So I then went into California. I met there with some people who owned a software company called PetrolSoft. So I signed a thing called VAR, Value Added Reseller Agreement. And that thing was basically, it was a technology that you could use to synchronize how you run a depot, how you run your transportation businesses and stuff like that. So I bought the rights into that particular technology, and I brought that technology into South Africa. And today, everyone here, actually, in this market, runs out of that particular technology. So I moved from just being a wholesaler with, the Renaissance business, moved into becoming into oil terminaling, into providing technology. And in the process, when we were dealing with the policy issues, okay, I was massaging Total to say, listen, I should be one of the guys to lead your empowerment project. When you're looking for some people in terms of 25% base, I should be one of those guys. And fortunately, my business were actually appointed because we proved ourselves. We have to find a way to be independent. So I looked at different models. The two white gentlemen. The one was David Hidden. So David Hidden did a deal with BP in 1974. Where he looked into the slate, okay, of crude, the refined crude, and they found two products: a propane and a butane, which are basically LPG products. So he says, I can purify these things and come up with something which is a feedstock for deodorants and stuff like that. So he formed a company called Pure Gas, and it became 98% market share just in that particular niche space. Today, Tarulo owns controlling stake in FFS. I said, listen, I can't move a dial into decision-making of Total, and at some stage, I'd like to also control my own destiny. So we sold. So we took the cash. And for our portion, I bought FFS. Listen, guys, it takes time. I mean, I started Tarulo in 1998, 20 years today, okay? And I'm still at it. And I just think that it's possible to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, and the industry will support you if they see that you know what you're talking about, you've got credibility, you do not take bribes, you do stuff with good governance, good ethics. And you know what, if you don't have protocols, you don't have systems, you know, you are going nowhere. You're just gonna be, you're gonna have a Rolls Royce, but that's all you're gonna have. If I may just say that it's possible.
Yeah.
You know, it is absolutely possible, but you just have to have content knowledge.
Yes.
You've got to have interest in it. You can't do it just through the pedigree of the pigmentation of your skin. And I think at these seminars, I want to thank Naewasa for putting this kind of audience together. We spent 7 years negotiating 5%. 7 years negotiating 5%. Eventually we got it. Okay? So we have that, but it was a negotiation after negotiation after negotiation. And you know what? You just have to keep at it. We have an SPM. There is not a single black company that actually owns part of the SPM.
BIPA is a Black Energy Professionals Association. It's a young organization. It was formed as a NPO, non-profit organization, last year, 2017. To us, really, economic transformation is about moving from, let's say, the traditional models of being an investor and owner, moving from that element to be an operator of assets, to be an employer of people, and therefore to be a citizen of the world. In this country, I think 93% of our electricity is produced out of coal, 1% on renewables. So the challenge as we want to transform our energy space, and obviously as black people wanting to participate in that, is how to actually sustainably move or get our energy triangle to be in balance and finding innovative solutions. There are players, and I think there are a lot of studies actually that are going on. There are policymakers who are targeting 2100, 8 years from now. They are seeing a world without carbon. You know, in other words, you know, no crude oil, no natural gas, and this is not something that probably, as we sit here today, we actually, you know, it doesn't concern us. You know, by the time our generations or that are coming after us, we want them to actually participate in those, but we must actually start thinking and start being involved in those things today.
This energy transition that the world is going through, from this carbon-intensive to less carbon-intensive energy provision. The interesting thing about these new technologies compared to the existing ones is that the barriers to entry are much lower. And there lies opportunity for transformation in South African economy. Technology is on your side.
How enabling are the practices of the major industry players to new entrants?
And the reason why we all get crowded in marketing, because that's the barriers to entries are quite more lower there. What is really always a big problem is access to two things in any area: access to the product, and then access to financing, and then access to marketing. Every small and medium enterprises faces these three. Is the environment enabling? This is South Africa. There was times, and as we start this, different roles which were key decision makers in those roles happened to be people who were resisting transformation. Some of them have left, some of them have come in, and that is why now we've got a cadre of young stars that we're putting them in the strategic positions and giving them a mandate to say, support transformation.
The Transnet board has approved an island view strategy. In April this year, we had a stakeholder engagement session in Durban to share the principles of the strategy with all our customers and also the tenants at the Island View precinct. The Island View precinct is in Durban. We cannot afford to compromise the security of supply. We all know that. And secondly, we're pushing for a radical socio-economic transformation. We're talking job reservation, we're talking job creation.
The current scenario that we have is that we're doing the Island View strategy because of national imperatives. And 2 of the 3 imperatives that you see on the screen here is driven through the Ports Act, which is our Bible for doing what we need to do in the ports. So the first of those 2 is that we need to ensure provision of adequate, affordable and efficient port services. And the second of those is that in terms of the Act, we are mandated to transform port operations, and specifically with the view to have more historically disadvantaged persons to get into port operations. The third aspect is one of those things that we need to do because that precinct services probably about 50 to 60% of the fuel coming into this country. The refineries in Durban caters for about probably 80% of the crude oil imported into this country, and chemicals from that precinct probably represents about 60% of the chemical products that are manufactured for this country. We've been investing in the infrastructure in that port. It's primarily the berths. And as was alluded to earlier as well, we have currently leases in that footprint that have expired. And we now need to follow the next steps to go to appoint people that can come in and operate on those pieces of land. Now, historically, the situation that we've had is that the leases that are currently expiring has been there for probably about 50 to 60 years. So firstly, all of these sites that have expired must go through an open tender process. And what we will be advertising when we go out on this open process is for companies to come and operate in that precinct that must be at a level 4 triple BEE, and we're looking for 51% black ownership in terms of those companies. That will be a 2-phased process. The first phase will be what we call an RFQ process. In other words, what we'll do is we'll go to the market and we will look for parties that qualify to be submitting bids for the sites. And then what will happen, the asset condition will also be completed in October, and we'll have the results of that. And then we'll go through the process of evaluating all of the potential interested bidders, the bids that came in. We will shortlist all of those people, and then in the financial year 1920, our financial year starts in April. We will then commence with the process of going out on tender, and then the companies that have qualified to participate in the tender process will then be asked to submit bids. And we then anticipate that after they've submitted bids, we will do the evaluation of the bids, appoint the preferred bidders, and that will take us to roughly about the end of the 2019-20 financial year, probably about January to March 2020, where we will be in a position to start bringing in new entrants into that Island View precinct.
I think to start with from the ESCOM point of view, and maybe if I can zoom in on the energy side, we do have a memorandum of understanding with funders like the IDC and some of the commercial banks as well. And that helps obviously with these companies now, the young ones, to access funding and working capital. Total procurement spend, which included coal and primary energy, was 178 billion rands, of which 85% of that spend was for triple BEE companies. We're doing a lot, but really where we are, our main commitment is that obviously we will work with our suppliers, with all the stakeholders, to make sure that we actually on a road of continuous improvement.
Interest rate is not a generic, matter. It's based on an individual, application. So remember, interest rate, gets ascribed, based, on the risk grade, that each and every one of those proposals come through. So the bank, for an example, has got what they call the DG rating, which is a default grade, rating, and really a scale, of between 1 and 21, right? So in that scale, if you score 21, you're still investment grade, but you're the highest risk. And the further down you go, you're lower and lower risk. I think there's a rule of thumb that says between DG1 and DG12, you are prime rate. But if you go on the other side of that scale, let's say DG13, then you start being prime plus. You can imagine when you get to DG21, in terms of your risk rating, you could be prime plus 6 or whatever, the case may be. If you default, what is the amount of loss, that, I'm going to do. And another one called the EAD, which is exposure at default, as well. So all these things, go through, a very, very complex, mathematical formulation, and ultimately it gives you a score. And the feeders, to all of these things is a whole lot of factors. The industry you're investing in, the type of business you're investing in, your experience, your knowledge.
Just for the benefit of everybody, within Island View, I mentioned that we have two types of operations. There's chemical type businesses and there are petroleum type businesses. So we have already a challenge because one half, it's not exactly 50%, but one half of the business is regulated and the other half is not regulated. So on the one half, when we go through the petroleum type sites that will become available, that will be subjected to a lot of regulatory requirements. And that regulatory requirement sits also from two regulators. We've got the ports regulator, and in terms of the ports regulator, we have to meet certain requirements. And then we have got the energy regulator, specifically in the Pipelines Act, that regulates all facilities that import or export or handle liquid bulk.
We have a strategic relationship with Naewasa. I come from a startup company, Setanex. I come from a startup company, Setanex. I embarked on a very ambitious project to use methanol, in particular in the transport industry. The intermediate prior to getting to the gasoline was DME, dimethyl ether. And little did we know at that stage that had we stopped there, we would have actually landed with diesel, a very good diesel substitute. At that time, it wasn't known. It's already being used in China. China is the biggest producer of DME in the world. The growth in the DME market is currently at about 12% per annum, which is really a fast growth. I want to go and just show you the simplicity of the plants. They are very, very simple. Here is a typical plant of a DME, producing about 80,000 tons per annum. Very simple design, really. Compare that, a diesel machine from Shell in Qatar. If you compare that with this, and then you get the same fuel, but with really good burning properties and environmental sustainability, then you can obviously see that the amount of capex required is much less. I would like to present to you a business opportunity which is in the pipeline.